This theological discussion unpacks a specific framework of future accountability for believers, focusing on the judgment seat of Christ as an event purely for the assessment of service, explicitly stating it is not for the condemnation of sin. The central argument is that motivation for faithful action must be entirely directed towards glorifying Christ, rather than seeking personal recognition or earthly reward. According to this view, faithful service involves the diligent stewardship of one's time, talent, and treasure. While such service earns rewards symbolized by crowns, the text posits that the greatest reward is Christ himself, signifying a deeper relationship and intimacy with the divine as the ultimate goal. This structure creates a paradoxical motivation where pursuing selfless service paradoxically yields the greatest personal return.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to stack up the source material, cut through the noise, and really give you the insights you need. Today, we're digging into something pretty specific, a theological idea about, well, future reward and what should motivate us. Our source is an excerpt from a message called The Promise of Heaven. It's part of the Five Crowns video series on Turning Point Plus by Dr. David Jeremiah. It's quite popular and very, prescriptive. We want to really unpack its main arguments. That's right. And for you listening in, the mission here is pretty clear. We need to get a handle on how this framework defines a really key future event, a sort of personal accounting, and maybe even more importantly, understand the specific motivations it lays out for, well, faithful action, which can seem a bit counterintuitive sometimes. Just to be clear, we're not here to debate the doctrine itself. Our goal is to understand what it says and what it asks of the listener. Okay, let's unpack this then. The source starts by painting a picture, right? A specific scene, believers in the future. What's the foundational scene being said here? What makes it different from, say, other future events people talk about in theology?
Yeah, it details this really significant future moment. Every believer, it says, will stand before Christ. It sounds like an intense, personal review, but the absolute critical starting point, the foundation, really is the clarification about why this meeting happens. Uh, okay. And this is where the nuance really matters, doesn't it? Because often when you hear standing before Christ, the mind immediately jumps to judgment, like traditional judgment of sin. Exactly. But the source makes a really strong immediate distinction, and this is the key insight. It completely shifts the focus. The source explicitly states that this event, often called the judgment seat of Christ in this tradition, is not for condemnation. The message is very clear on this. Judging sin isn't the purpose here, because in this view, the believer's sins are already dealt with, covered by Christ's sacrifice. Okay, so why should you, the listener, really focus on that distinction? If sin is off the table, why even have this meeting? What's really at stake? Well, it changes everything about the interaction, the whole mood, the objective. If it was about condemnation, you'd expect fear, right? But since sin is considered covered in this framework, the focus moves completely away from like a legal judgment and towards what? Towards assessment, accountability, stewardship, you could say. Think of it less like a criminal trial and more like a really thorough performance review, a performance review. So we're not checking the charge sheet, we're checking the work history, the resume. That's a good way to put it. It implies this incredible level of responsibility for what you do after you've accepted the core beliefs, right? So it moves from the question of who you are, which is settled, a child of God in this view, to what you did, to exactly what did you do with the time, the talents, the resources you were given during your life. The whole interaction is focused on the service performed, which brings us right to the purpose then. Yes, the source says this moment is specifically for believers to receive rewards for faithful service. It's structured entirely around positive recognition for diligence during earthly life. That sets up a really powerful connection, almost like cause and effect. Actions now have direct, quantifiable results later, like a spiritual investment portfolio. And the series title, Five Crowns, suddenly makes a lot more sense. It suggests these aren't just, participation trophies, they're significant markers of achievement, right? And this is where the criteria start to become clearer. What earns a reward? The source consistently links faithfulness and service. It suggests recognition isn't just for like big flashy moments, but for the steady, consistent application of belief over time, endurance, sacrifice, loyalty. Those seem to be the qualities being recognized. So it's like that performance review. What are the key performance indicators? Is it just about being seen doing good things, or is it something deeper? Well, the source seems to imply a pretty holistic evaluation. How were resources managed? You know, the classic trio time, talent, and treasure. Did you use your unique gifts for the mission? Did you dedicate your time, steward finances responsibly? But what's really fascinating is the implication that the quality isn't just the outcome, but the intent behind it. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me because the source is very, very specific about that intent, that internal motivation. If we're doing service that leads to these eternal rewards, how do we make sure we're doing it for the right reason? What's the mandate here? What's the proper motive? The source is absolutely clear on this unwavering, really, the prescribed motivation. Our service must always be focused on one goal to glorify Christ. That single intent is presented as what validates the action. It doesn't matter how big or small, how visible or hidden the service is. But hang on. If we're human, aren't we kind of wired to want recognition? We like praise, we post achievements, we want promotions. So telling people not to seek recognition, doesn't that just set up this massive internal conflict? How do you even do that authentically? That is the challenge, isn't it? A profound one. The source explicitly discourages seeking recognition for yourself. It demands a kind of selflessness that, yeah, feels counter to a lot of modern culture, maybe even human nature. If you connect it to the bigger picture, this principle basically says the value of your service is almost inversely proportional to your ego's involvement. Wow. So, like a quiet act of charity done purely out of love for God would rank infinitely higher than, say, a huge public donation made just to get your name on a building. That's definitely the interpretation that focusing on glorifying Christ leads to. It requires a purity of heart. The measure of success isn't the earthly applause or the result itself, it's the why behind it. The person doing the serving has to try and well disappear behind the one receiving the glory. You have to remove the self from the equation for the service to count as truly faithful. In this context, that creates a real tension, though, a paradox almost. Most you're doing service that results in rewards, but you're told not to do it for the rewards. It forces the question, if the crowns, the recognition aren't the main goal, then what is the greatest return? What's the ultimate prize for faithful service according to this message? Yeah, and the source addresses that directly. It cuts through all the external stuff, the crowns, the status, whatever they might be, and gives the ultimate takeaway. It clearly states that the greatest reward is Christ himself.
That really flips the script on rewards, doesn't it? It shifts the ultimate prize from something external, some object or status, to something internal, a spiritual reality, a deeper relationship. So it stops being about getting something from God and becomes about getting more of God, which, if you think about it, was the original goal of the service, glorifying Him. Exactly. It brings the whole thing together. It creates this closed loop for the believer. You serve faithfully to glorify Christ. That service leads to recognition, maybe symbolized by crowns, but that recognition itself just points you back to a deeper connection with Christ. The reward validates the selfless motive by giving you precisely what you were seeking through the service in the first place: more intimacy, a closer connection to the divine. So the word reward changes meaning. It's not a transaction like getting paid. It's more like an enhanced state of being. The crowns, or whatever symbols used, they're just markers, maybe keys, that unlock deeper access to the very presence that motivated you initially, right? And that framework actually creates a powerful intrinsic motivation. Yeah. If the service itself is what deepens the connection you want, then the reward isn't just something handed out at the end. The reward is kind of inherent in the act of serving faithfully. Now, it almost makes pursuing selflessness the most self-interested thing you can do, paradoxically, because it brings the greatest personal return, that deeper relationship. That's a really insightful way to look at this whole structure. Okay, let's do a quick recap of the core ideas we've unpacked for you today. First, that future component this message describes. It's about reward, assessing service. Critically, it's not about condemning sin. Second, those rewards are based specifically on faithful service, often seen as how you steward your time, talents, resources. Third, the motivation, the why, has to be about glorifying Christ. You need to actively avoid doing it just to get recognition for yourself. And finally, the ultimate reward, the thing that makes sense of it all. It's presented as Christ Himself, a deeper relationship. Yeah, that framework gives a pretty complete picture for theological action and motivation within this specific view. So, here's the final thought. We want to leave you with something to mull over. If this message implies the ultimate reward is really just more of the relationship you're already seeking when you serve faithfully, what does that actually say about the value of your service right here, right now, in the present moment? If you truly believe that relationship is the greatest prize, what changes might that knowledge inspire in how you approach your daily tasks, your motivations? Start today? That's a deep question, a real challenge to how we often operate day to day. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these concepts of future reward and motivation. We hope this perspective gives you something valuable to think about.